Welcome to Master Agent Mindset. Today we have a guest that needs no introduction.
For having me, Pedro. I'm Troy Reieron, CEO of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Arizona, California, and Nevada properties. Great to be here.
Well, great to have you here. We're all anxious to hear your story.
Pedro, kind of like what we talked about. Let's just keep it simple and let's keep it real today. Let's talk about the journey.
Let's talk about that.
And really, how we got to where we are today. And, it's not an overly exciting story, but it's a story, and it's my story. I started back in the early 2000s. I had just returned back. I did a short stint in motorsports. I went to work for NASCAR for a little while.
Really?
Roush Racing was the company I worked for.
Roush.
And
love those cars.
I'm a motorsports nut. Mm-hmm. And what I found out real quickly is you're either a West Coast guy or an East Coast guy. And I'm a West Coast guy. So as much as I loved what I was doing, I wasn't happy being where I was at. And I quickly moved back to the West Coast. And when I got back, I didn't know what I was going to be doing at that point. A buddy of mine was working for Clear Channel Radio, and he said, "Hey, Troy, why don't you come sell radio? You'll love it. It's a blast. You get to go to free concerts all the time, and I think you'd be great at it." And I had nothing going. So I said, "You know what? Why not? Why not? There's nothing holding me back. I've got nothing else to do. I've got to earn an income somehow." So I went into work with my buddy at Clear Channel Radio, and found out pretty quickly it was absolutely not my calling. But I tell you that story because I met some interesting individuals along that journey. And one of the folks, one of the three individuals that I met was opening a mortgage company in Roseville, California, which is right outside of Sacramento for those that aren't sure where Roseville is. And as I met this gentleman, he was wanting to put together this large advertising campaign and launch a mortgage company inside of Sacramento. And these are Bay Area guys, so there's a lot of tech money coming in. And I said, okay, well, I can help you with that, but unfortunately, the day you want to meet, I'm going with clients. I'm taking clients skiing that day. Perhaps, we can meet another time. And he says, "Well, Troy, where are you going to be skiing at?" I said, "Well, just, right there in Lake Tahoe, at, I forget the resort name. It wasn't Hathaway, it wasn't Squaw. It was... doesn't matter." It was outside of Truckee, California. So skied that day. And when you're done skiing, for those of you that ski or do professional sports, at the end of it, you're kind of sweaty and yucky and you kind of don't want to see anybody. So right. I didn't believe these guys were the real deal. And boy, was this a lesson learned for me. They said, "Just meet us after you're done skiing. We've got a house right down the road." And I said, okay. So I pull up into this driveway in this beautiful log home. And I knock on the door in my sweats and turtleneck and hair's all disheveled and I probably don't smell the greatest. And this young lady opens the door who looks like she should have been on the cover of Vogue magazine. And I thought, oh my gosh, these guys are the real deal. And luckily I was prepared, but I wasn't prepared aesthetically. And then the gentleman comes to the door behind her and he looks like Ken from Ken and Barbie. And I'm like, my confidence is just dropping by the second. And I go into this beautiful home and I meet with him and his two partners. I lay out my advertising campaign to them. And part of what I did is I was pitching my competition to them as well. And so I had ad campaigns for our group of stations and our competition's group of stations. And he stopped me and he said, "Troy, are you an ad agency?" And I said, "No." "Why are you pitching your competitions?" And I said, "Well, to be effective and successful as a startup, I can't offer you this demographic. It's critical that you at least spend some money." Now, I've taken the lion's share of your budget, but it's important you spend some money in other areas to make sure you're successful. Well, that was the minute he started recruiting me into his mortgage company. And lo and behold, fast forward, was the first person ever hired into this mortgage company.
Really?
Yeah. And
wow.
That's really how I got into the real estate field. But it just so happens the gentleman that they hired to build out the team, his name was Chris Stewart. And many of you on this podcast might be hearing that name, Chris Stewart, because you've heard it multiple times. He was the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, the brand itself.
Yes.
So let's fast forward that journey a little bit. Chris is really the reason I'm sitting in the chair today. Kind of a spoiler alert for you. But I was in the mortgage company for I think almost 6 years. And I was a loan originator for a year, and then I ended up building teams and helping them scale that company up and down the West Coast. We opened multiple offices, and really we're startups in all of these different states.
Wow.
And that was really step one for me in real estate.
So you understand all that there is in mortgages, right?
I do.
You understand that world, which is critical in your position, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it is. It very much so is, because obviously a mortgage is not only the gateway to our customer, the agent, the gateway to their paychecks, it's also the gateway to fulfill the American dream of our other client, which is the consumer. So it was critical. After being in mortgage for about 6 years, decided that I was a little burned out, and knew that at that point it really wasn't what I wanted to do any longer. And I had thought, you know what, I think there's more for me out there. And I opened a marketing company, of all things.
A marketing company.
A marketing company, yeah. If you're familiar with experiential marketing, and I'll give you the quick version. It's street teams, wrapped vehicles, events, doing those types of things.
Yeah.
And this is in 2000 and just cresting on 2007 when I did this. Fortunately, it was a fairly new concept. You know, the energy drinks were just coming out. They were starting to do these things, but it was fairly new, and ad agencies really didn't know what to do. So I became an ad agency to become a client to those ad agencies to help fulfill them and implementing these street teams. Well, we all know what happened in 2007.
Right.
We had a massive turn in our world, and our economy crashed.
Yeah, big time.
And I lost my shorts.
Yeah.
I lost almost everything. I lost everything to a threshold where I said, I've hit my threshold. It's the first time I've ever opened a business that wasn't successful, and I failed at it. Failed miserably.
So your failure built, I'm guessing, a lot of character and lessons, and a doctorate degree in failure, I'm guessing.
I'll tell you, Pedro, you know, from being a guy that had small companies my whole life, building small companies, starting at the age of 19 and being successful, I didn't understand failure until that moment in my life. Thankfully, I saved a little bit of money. We left San Diego because we'd moved to San Diego at that time. We moved back to Washington State, where I had a property up there. Back into that property, humbled myself, and went back into mortgage, which is something I thought I'd never wanted to do. During that time, I was miserable, borderline depressed, trying to figure out what happened to my life. And a bunch of folks that used to work for me at that mortgage company prior to me leaving the mortgage company, they all left after I did, and they went to a startup, a tech startup in Seattle, Washington, which is where I was living at that time. And they called and they said, Troy, you've got to come check this out. These are really smart guys. It's a tech startup. It's real estate based. I think you would be ideal to come over and help these guys build this organization. And I said, you know what, I'll talk to anybody, because I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. I've got a wife. I don't have a child at this time, but I've got a wife that we were married at the age of 19, still together today.
So was she your high school sweetheart?
She was. Yeah, she was. And had a lot of confidence issues at that point, just because I felt like I wasn't providing at the level that I was used to providing for my family. And so I went and talked to this person. I went and talked to their chief revenue officer, learned all about the company, and was told that, Troy, we don't have anything at your level. However, if you want to come in, start on the sales floor, cold call real estate agents, then the second I have something for you, I'd be interested in offering that to you. And boy, I had to do some more deep reflection. I took a look at the company, looked over the sales floor. I'll get to who this company is here in a second. And I thought, wow, this is a massive step back from where I thought I would be at this time in my life.
What year was that?
This was after the failure. It's probably around 2008, cresting 2009, I'm guessing. The economy was starting to recover. But I was, I had personal debt. I didn't have any debt. I was pretty good about that, but I had my own personal debt to build back. And I made the decision to start with this company named Zillow, and sat on a sales floor with people that were typically 5 to 10 years younger than I was at this point, and cold call and dial for dollars.
A company called Zillow.
Company called Zillow.
Oh boy.
Yeah, there was a couple hundred people, I think, at the company at that time. Within a year, they elevated me to a new position. I ended up joining their field sales team, and I ended up working with home builders, the top home builders in the company, or in the country, excuse me. With those top home builders, I very quickly elevated to running that group and building that group, and became wildly successful in building the organization with the new construction side and home builders across. So my territory was the United States. We had a small team of assassins, I would call them. There was 4 of us, upwards of 5 of us at times, and we covered the United States, and we grew that business unit out for Zillow.
Well, that's just a little bit of territory you had to cover.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, just a little bit.
Just the whole of the United States.
Just a little bit.
Right.
And really, to fast forward, there was a couple of tech startups I did after Zillow as well, because I love the art of the start. And during that time, they're kind of boring startups. I won't bore you with those, but during that time, Chris Stewart had reached out again and said, "Hey, we met back in the day, and we always stayed in tight contact. Chris is a dear friend of mine today. He's a great business mentor. He's family to me." And Chris had reached out, and he goes, "Hey, Gino Blafari just sold his company in Taro," and Chris was working for Gino at the time. He had left mortgage a few years prior.
That was a big deal during that time.
It was a big deal, yeah. And Gino sold, and we're moving to Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, which is HSF, Home Services Franchises, the name of that division. And he said, "Love for you to come over and help me out." And I talked to a couple of folks over there, and I said, "Chris, what would the role actually be?" And he goes, "Well, you'd be looking for mergers and acquisitions for a lot of our current Berkshire Hathaways, and you'd be interacting with the ownership groups, and you'd be working with the franchises as well, and perhaps you might even open up or help somebody start a franchise in a market where we don't have any franchises." And I said, "Okay." And I considered it and pondered it, and I love Chris like a brother, and respectfully, I turned him down. I said, "Chris, it's not for me. I'm working at this tech startup. I really enjoy the people I'm working with. I haven't accomplished my mission, and the mission was to help them get that company for sale to Zillow. And if and when that happens, perhaps we'll talk again about it." And it did. It happened. The company I was with, we were able to get it where it needed to be, and they were able to sell that company to Zillow.
Nice.
And it was at that point where I had a decision to make. Do I want to look at opportunities back inside of Zillow? Which you hit the nail on the head. With that amount of territory, I was never home.
Right.
And
that's got to be rough on the family.
It was. And I had a daughter at this point. We had a baby girl. And at one point in time, my baby girl, who was, I think she was 2 or 3 years old, had asked my wife, she said, "Is Daddy going to be at our house this weekend?" And that was when I had made the decision to move on from Zillow and be home more often. But so Chris reached out and said, "Troy, the startup you were working with sold. What are you doing now?" And I looked at Chris and I said, "Your timing is impeccable. I don't know what I'm going to do
Did
next."
he have some inside information somewhere?
He did not. No, he did not. He was following what was going on. He was following Zillow. He also knew that I was heavily involved with business coaching, personal coaching, and I was working towards perhaps opening a practice just in mindset and coaching. And I said, "Chris, I don't know. I've got three journeys. I could go back to Zillow, which I really don't want to do. I'm not. I don't want to be on the road that much. I'm highly considering opening a practice and helping companies build themselves and be bigger than they are today. And I guess I've got an option to talk to you again too." And within 72 hours, he had me in Irvine, California, evaluating what it would look like to become a part of the Berkshire Hathaway Home Services brand.
What year was that?
That was 2017.
2017.
Yeah,
Okay.
late 2017. I joined HSF in September of 2017.
September 2017.
Yeah.
Got it.
So fast forward to today, what did that mean? Well, I was now covering 13 states on the West Coast, so I was back to traveling quite a bit. But it brought me to the relationship that really brought me here, and that was with Mark Stark. Mark Stark was one of my largest clients. And I worked hand in hand with Mark on acquisitions, As a matter of fact, the largest acquisition we did as a company was one that I brought to Mark, and that was the Tarbella organization in California. Working through those things, Mark and I became pretty darn good friends, and I would say, similar to Chris Stewart, Mark's family to me.
Yeah, good man.
Great, one of the greatest human beings out there. And we were sitting at dinner one time, and I said, Mark, I am going to be making a change soon. I've got to get off the road more. I need to see my family more. I miss them. My daughter's getting older. And he said, don't do anything. I've got something for you. And at that point, I said, well, what do you got? And we started talking through what that might look like. And with Gino's blessing, we talked to Gino about it. Gino said, Troy, I think that's fantastic, and I think that's the perfect trajectory for your next steps in the organization here at Berkshire Hathaway. So I was blessed to work with Mark for a few years. And most recently, Mark brought me into this organization and put me into his seat as of July of last year.
Yeah. Okay. He's made a difference in my life personally, and I know in countless others. He's the kind of person that talks from the heart, but when he says something, he does something. That made him over and above most men. Mm-hmm. Anyone could look in your eyes and just give you some advice and tell you something that sounds kind of good. Mm-hmm. But he's always looking for a way to help. And I have this time, there was just happenstance. I'm at the airport in Las Vegas, and I see him cross, right? And he was with his assistant at the time, and I go, hey, Mark, how you doing? He just looks, and I could see that he just went through a hurricane. His eyes, his face, I mean, I have never seen him that tired. And he goes, how you doing, Pedro? I go, good. I go, what's going on? It's cool to see you. I'm headed to Peru. And then he goes, yeah, well, have a great trip. And he goes, well, I'm going to go. Is there anything I can help you with? Mm-hmm. And I just looked at him. I'm like, thanks for asking, but no, I'm good. He goes, all right. Well, then I'll talk to you later. And he turns around and walks away. And then I just kept walking, and I'm thinking about that. And I'm like, who does that? I mean, most people would have been, hey, how you doing, Pedro? Good to see you. All right. Hey, listen, I got to go. I've had a long day, but hey, good to see you. No, he actually stopped, pondered that we have a working relationship. Even though he was incredibly tired, he asked me, what can I do for you? And most people wouldn't have done that. And that is one small example of how he's helped me out and how he's been in my life. But I've seen it with many other people in the organization. His loyalty from agents goes 20 years, 25 years since the beginning deep. And people, when they talk about Mark, they get a glow. It's kind of like what I'm getting right now, right? Yeah. Like you got. Okay. Yeah. Big respect for the man.
Yeah, Pedro, he truly is. He's one of the best. And you know, Mark saw something in me that I didn't even see in me, and he's probably done the same for you.
Oh, he's a kingmaker.
He
There's
really
no doubt he's a kingmaker.
Yeah, he is. You know, when I joined the organization, January 3rd of last year as his general manager, he said, Troy, you know you're my succession plan. And I said, well, we talked about that, and he goes, nope, you are the guy. You are exactly what this company needs. And I didn't understand that at the time. And you know, fast forward to July of last year, and Mark said, "You're ready." And I said, "Mark, I am not ready. I haven't even met half of our agents yet." And he goes, "Brother, you're ready." He says, "The rest you'll learn, and I'm here. I'm your backstop." And I'll tell you what, Pedro, he has been the most phenomenal backstop anyone could ever imagine. I could call Mark right now on this podcast, and he would answer.
Oh, I believe that.
And he is always there for me if I need him. He has been incredible counsel, an amazing business mentor and leader. And I'll never forget what he said to me when he basically threw me the keys in July. I said, "Mark, my whole goal is to protect the legacy that you've built in this company. I'll never fill your shoes. I'll have to fill my own shoes. but you have my word. I will protect your legacy at all costs. And he looked at me and says, Troy, thank you for that. But you know what? Don't protect my legacy. Make it better.
Oh, those are profound words.
And it was just right off the cuff, which tells you what kind of man Mark Stark is. And I couldn't be more blessed to have him in my life as a human being and friend and mentor, and really just that backstop as we run into challenges daily that we may not have the answers to.
Yeah. Well, I think we're both in agreement about
Yeah.
Mark. I think we're 100% in sync on that. And your life's journey, you lost big time.
Mm-hmm.
I think every real estate agent listening to you right now is literally grabbing their tissue. We all share those stories. It was an incredible time prior, and then it was a horrific time for all of us after. It was the post event. I don't think people understand how bad it was, how you couldn't get a deal done. And on the mortgage side, we share that because I've been in mortgages since 95, right? Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, it went from 1 month having a portfolio of 40, 50 banks to be able to go to, mortgage companies to be able to go to and do any deal, to they're all going out of business, one after another, Bear Stearns, New Century, Option One, you name them, and you have people closing. And then you got situations where you're stuck because there's nothing. It was a time of great grief for all of us. So we all shared that. It's a few of us that actually had what you had, the ability to see that this is getting bad. I got to cut my losses. And you know what? I got a home. I protected that. And I'm just going to move my family there. And I'm going to regroup. And a lot of people didn't have that foresight. And they thought that this would just blow over in a few months and it's all going to get good again. And it didn't get good. It was kind of horrific for about 3 years after that.
It was. Right? Yeah, it was. It really was.
We're all facing interesting times. And I'm not a naysayer. I'm not a guy that wants to say the cup is half empty. I'm not trying to be that guy right now with you. I'm just going to ask you. I know that we're all facing a difficult time. Most of the agents that I personally know, and I know a lot, are down in their production. They're not out, and everything you get is selling, and every buyer's buying. So we're okay. It's just we see that fewer and fewer are able to come to the closing table. What do you have any comments about that you could share with us?
Yeah. I mean, Pedro. What we're facing is a new normal. You know, if you look back from 2012 until June of last year, we were in a great market.
Unbelievable market.
And it just kept getting better, and it kept getting better. And the media would pipe in and say, oh, we're going to have a bust here, it's going to break, and it never broke. Then the pandemic hit, and it broke for a second, for a whiff of air. And then it was better than it's ever been, than anyone has ever seen. And fast forward to June of last year, and we really started experiencing that. By the way, July is when Mark threw me the keys. Thanks for that, buddy.
Yeah.
So,
well, he went through 2007, 8, 9, 10 through this. We kind of knew, right?
Yeah, he did. He sure did. And he saw it coming. We talked about it. He's like, Troy, you are in for one of the rockiest rides you'll ever have been in. As soon as you do take the keys, just know that, because we have forgotten those times, and these times today are still way better than those times back in 07, 08,
I agree there.
09. But we've forgotten. We're looking at interest rates today, 30-year fixed rates, mid to high sevens. Everybody thinks that's so terrible. We haven't seen it. But if you average that out over 20 years, it's slightly above average. I mean, ever so slightly above average. And so looking forward to today, because I'm not a naysayer either. I'm a true believer in transactions will still occur. There will be less of them. As a matter of fact, the statistics I was looking at this week said there was three. Statista was one of them, Redfin was one, and NAR was one of them. And we're going to do anywhere from 5.1 million transactions this year to 4.3. So somewhere in that 800,000 transactions we will land. Still a lot of transactions. The great agents out there, and Pedro, I know we started off today by saying, it's really not about Pedro, but the great agents like you, Pedro, you're going to do transactions this year. You're going to be just fine. You're going to get a bigger piece of the pie.
So basically what you're saying is that although it is a little rougher than it's been, it's projecting within about 800,000 transactions is what you said?
Somewhere in there, correct.
Yeah. And whatever the case may be, there will always, in my opinion, be niches where you can make money. I mean, in the 90s, when things got really weird, like about 6, 7, and 8, we actually started craziness. We started doing owner carry 10%. I mean, we went all out doing different things. The rates today sitting at going to 8, 8.5. Well, I would really like, because you are a mortgage guy, I'm a mortgage guy, we can talk a little LOEs. What do you see happening with that?
Well, there's a few schools of thought on that. And as Americans, we get tired of waiting. Amazon Prime is 2-day shipping. We're no different. We are designed to want things now. So while many people may sit on the fence for a while and kick and scream about interest rates, they're eventually going to move. They're eventually going to transact. It's just a matter of when. And again, because our attention spans are so tight, oftentimes that's why we're still transacting today. In other parts of the country, I can't believe that people are going to say, well, we had 3% interest rates about a year and a half ago, and now it's almost 7.5%, 8%. I'm just going to wait until it goes back to 3%. I think many people are a little more reserved than we are, but we're not. We want it, and we want it now. Transactions are going to occur, no matter where the rate is. We'll end up buying a little bit less house. The problem we're running into right now is inventory. Inventory is tight. So what we're experiencing today is you've got tight inventory, higher rates, and higher demand as our population continues to grow. So do I see prices dropping? Not much. They are dropping a little bit. I think they've dropped 4 or 5% here in Las Vegas, maybe.
Yes.
But do I see them dropping tremendously? Do I see the bottom falling out? I don't, because demand is still there. It's not like we've quit producing human beings. It's not like people have quit moving into the United States. There's still demand. And homes are only so big. And builders can't keep up with demand. As a matter of fact, if builders built at the same rate that they're building today for 10 years, they will finally start to reach demand levels. So we're still going to transact. People are still going to move. People are still going to sell. Interest rates, people are just going to be able to afford a little bit less. The biggest problem that I see right now, Pedro, is it's the economy, it's the inflation, it's the uncertainty in government, it's the uncertainty in our inflation, because everything is not lining up according to as it should.
And I agree.
And that's what concerns me. That's the one concern I do have. Demand is still there. Homes still can't be built fast enough. That's the piece that sits out there that, honestly, I'm on the sidelines wondering how that's going to affect us one way or another. But it doesn't affect demand, and it doesn't affect population growth.
What you're saying is there could be a variable, and that is the inflation that you're watching. You're not that worried about it, but you're watching it. That, barring a black swan event, right?
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
We should be okay. I agree with that in part. The part that I really agree with is watching inflation. 100%. I think the Federal Reserve would agree. I think you and Jerome would have a great conversation on that, right?
For sure.
Right. To take it one more step on the inflation, on what else could possibly affect us, because I'm on the front lines fighting all the time, trying to get listings, trying to get buyers, right? And what's really hard is this conversation. Well, Pedro, my payment's $2,000 a month, right? And you're saying you can sell my house for $500,000, right? Yeah, we could. My rate's 2.5. Yeah, it is. That's a great rate. You know what? Yeah. So if I sell this to get this, what would my rate be? Well, if we buy it down and like all my bells and whistles, we might get it to 6.25 if the seller contributes and all that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what's my payment? Well, your payment would be, that's twice, Pedro, of what I'm paying now.
Sure.
Yeah, but, you're going to move up. You said you had your why. This is your why, blah, blah, blah. As skilled as I am to try to get people to overcome their own little objections that they have to try to get them their own goal, because as good as I am, I can't sell someone that doesn't want to sell their house, right?
Correct.
And I can't have them buy a house that they really don't want to buy because they're going to pay a 30-year mortgage. So I think seeing that on the front lines, the hesitancy of the people is, dude, I'm not going up unless my income goes up another $1,000 a month. So I don't see. And that's where I think the inflation part really starts to play in, because when they're having pillow talk and they're saying, well, look, honey, if we get the house, it's a dream house right now. They're cheaper than they were. We can always refinance. We can always do this later, but we own the house now. But everything else has gone up. And now what? Yeah. And so that is the pillow talk. I really believe that as soon as the rates are starting to go down, it's going to release a lot of this pressure, and people are going to start moving again, and people are going to start doing with it. However, the inverse is true. If the rates go up and up and up, and neighborhoods start to sell because they have to, divorce, death, probate, bankruptcy, IRS, you name it, then what ends up happening is the neighborhoods start to go down, and they go down 10%, and then the next year 10%, and then now the pillow talk is like, well, we have 300,000, 200,000 in equity. If it keeps going down, we're losing 20, 30,000 a year. Now what?
All great points, and it's in my belief, and I think most of our industry's belief, that the rates are being pushed up to help curb inflation. So it's doing the exact opposite of what we want it to do at the same time. The only thing I would really say about that is that person, it's not your ideal client. They're not in it right now, and that's okay, because as real estate professionals, we build pipelines. They will be there. They still have the same want. Their wants might change now, and they might even change 6 months from now. And you know what? A year from now, moving up, they may want to move down. Man, this is getting harder and harder. I thought I was going to need a bigger place. We were going to have kids. We decided not to have kids. So now I actually need a smaller place now. So now my payment's going to be about the same, less to take care of. My air conditioning bill drops. My water bill drops. Everything drops a little bit because maybe I moved down instead. There's so many variables in there. That person is still part of your forever client program. They're still your forever client. They just may not be your client for today. Your clients for today, and you hit the nail on the head, is something happened in their life. They got married. They had a baby. They got a divorce. A parent was living with them, passed away. Whatever it might be, those are your ideal clients, and rate and payments are not as big of a factor at that point because they've had a life adjustment that they need and or desire to adjust to, and it's not all about payment anymore. It's about correcting behaviors in their current life.
You know what? I love talking to you, man, because that is 100%. That's when I have the panicked colleagues call me and, Pedro, what do you think? And I tell them, I go, this is a hard one. Yeah. We could see it in 2008, 9, where it was going because there was nothing to be able to do. But now we're all sitting on the fence. We're all working. We're all hitting the grind. We're all doing what we have to do. But there is one light that I see, and this is what I tell them. I say, look, how much equity does the average person have when they bought from 2000, let's call it 9 through 17, 16? And they're like, it's a lot. I go, yeah. So even if the property values do go down, and they may, the people that have homes right now are, for the most part, sitting with a good amount of money in the homes, and they're comfortable with the payment. So it's not going to be a crash like it was. Think of it, I tell them, as a shock. is a shock absorber, right? It's a shock absorber. That's what we got, right? So it's not good. For us, we have to be just smarter than the average. And I tell them, I said, you remember what happened in 8, 9, and 10? They're like, yeah. Did you go to work for a bank, foreclosures and all that? No. Well, maybe that's something you could have done and you wouldn't have been stressed then. And now maybe there's opportunities out there that you're not looking into that you should be trying. You've never prospected, right? Well, maybe you can do that. You've never really done a deep dive on a neighborhood, right? Have you? Open houses, power open houses, mailed to that neighborhood? No, I haven't. Well, before it was a little easier, right? Yeah, it was.
Yes, it was.
Well, maybe now you might want to try some of the things that have been there all along that you haven't done. And it's priceless to see the look on their faces of hope, because they were kind of bummed before they talked to me. But when they left, they're like, yeah, you're right. There's a couple things I can do that I am not doing that maybe I should start doing now. I'll give you the last
Sure.
word. You don't have to go anywhere, by the way, but I know you do, so go right ahead.
Yeah, no, it's you're spot on, and that just gets into activities. It gets into your what is your urgent few? What are the things that you must do every single day? What's your daily revenue commitment? What are the activities that you're doing today, and are they producing results? And if not, try other activities. The whole goal is don't do what sucks. If you don't like to cold call, don't cold call. You don't like to door knock, don't door knock. But you've got to do something, and you've got to find what you like. If you like it, you will do it well. If you don't like it, you won't do it well. In the economy and in the changes that we're experiencing today, you have to increase your activities. Not twofold, not threefold, probably fourfold at this point, because you have less ideal clients in your own database. They're still ideal clients, they're just not ideal clients for today. So go find a bunch more ideal clients. Get them in your database, and you will succeed. I promise you. It's all about, Pedro, you've heard it a gazillion times. It's all about outworking those that are working against you. You've got to work harder, smarter, and faster, and you've got to be diligent, and you've got to protect your time at all costs. Don't do things that don't hit 1, 2, or 3 of your urgent few items each day, and you'll create the perfect day if you do that.
That's amazing. Your words right there are going to touch a lot of people, because the truth is that's what people need to hear. And I'll give you guys a personal note with Mike Ferry, one of my heroes, right? He said this in several occasions, and basically he pointed out to some of the top agents when it was a changing market. And he said that these top agents, what they would do is, if they were prospecting 20 contacts, they doubled the contacts that they prospected. And the reasoning was to Mike, and Mike gave them the advice, but then he wanted feedback, right? So when he was talking to him, he says, listen, they told Mike, I cannot maintain the lifestyle that I've accustomed my family to without doubling up on my prospecting. And it's allowed me to move forward through this crisis and continue to provide what I've been providing to them all these years. And Mike summed it all up. He said was, get off your butt and double up and let's go. Because at the end, you've got responsibilities, obligations that you have to meet, and let's make this happen.
Just do it.
Just do it. Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Well, Pedro, thank you. Thanks for the invite on this. Again, this is really off the cuff today. But I appreciate you inviting me out here. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience. And I just, as you know, I'm an open book. If I can do anything to help anyone, please reach out anytime.
Now you heard it here. Thanks for listening to Master Agent Mindset. Have a wonderful day.